Auto insurance can all seem the same until it comes time to use it. So don't get stuck paying more for less coverage. Switch to USAA Auto Insurance and you could start saving money in no time. Get a quote today. Restrictions apply.
HBO's The Last of Us returns with a new season on Max. Every path has a price. 5 years after the events of the first season, Joel and Ellie are drawn into conflict with each other in a world even more dangerous than the one they left behind. CNN calls The Last of Us exquisite, fully realized, and worthy of the hype. The new season of the HBO original series, The Last of Us, premieres April 13th on Max. And listen to the official The Last of Us podcast wherever you get your podcasts.
Hey, Holly.
Hey, Dave.
What's going on with yourself today on the What Difference Does It Make podcast?
I feel like back to the 70s with our friends John Lennon and Yoko Ono.
Yes, there is a movie that's out. It's called 1-to-1, John and Yoko. And this is a look back at the early 70s. This is a time that John and Yoko were living, not at the Dakota.
Yes, it was on Bank Street.
Down in Greenwich Village. And this was the John and Yoko headquarters. So we have today in our studio, in our virtual studio, we have Sam Rice-Edwards, co-director and editor. He's going to talk about this film that he did with Kevin Macdonald, the director of the film. He had thousands of hours of footage and he put it all together, and we got to figure out how the heck he did that, because it's a really good film. We both saw it together in IMAX.
It's a very unique and interesting way to tell this story, which was very specific about the only full-length concert that John gave after the Beatles.
Yeah, so we saw the film, we loved it. We have a lot of questions. So fortunately, we have Sam Rice-Edwards with us, and why don't we get into it after we tell people about our social media and how to find more about the What Difference Does It Make podcast.
Please visit our YouTube channel at What Difference Does It Make podcast and our other social media at WDDIM podcast. We have some fine clips of this interview with Sam and also lots of other interviews and fun stuff on our YouTube channel.
That sounds great. I'm excited to talk about John and Yoko. I'm fascinated by this era in the early 70s. So let's get into it right now. This is Sam Rice-Edwards. He is the co-director and editor of the film 1-to-1, John and Yoko, and he is on the What Difference Does It Make podcast. There he is.
Hi.
Hi.
Hey, Sam Rice-Edwards.
Thanks for joining us.
Nice to meet you guys. Total pleasure.
Are you in New York in relation to the film?
No, actually, I am here for sort of random kind of judging panel on something else. So I've just come over for a few days for that.
So this film, is it exclusively in IMAX right now? Is that how it's going to be released? Is that the way everyone's going to be seeing it?
So it's exclusively in IMAX for 2 or 3 days, and then it's a worldwide release after that in cinemas. It's different experiencing in IMAX, but I was quite relieved that somebody who had seen it on TV said it works really well on TV. I've been really thinking of it as a cinema film because I think it's really a great film to go to see in the cinema. I think it's a sort of an experience with the concert and everything, all parts of it.
Yeah, we saw it in IMAX, but it feels like you're watching it on TV. There is, like, I guess, for those Gen Z people that are watching it, it almost feels like you're watching a TikTok because there is the switching of channels all the time from one subject to another. You're kind of bipping and you're going from one place to another. It's very frenetic. And when did that idea come about? Like, this is the way we want to put this together.
Yeah, whose vision was that?
Well, Kevin came up with that idea. And when I first spoke to Kevin, one thing he was very clear about, and I was really pleased to hear from him, was that he was like, look, we can't make another John Lennon film. There's so many out there. There's so many Beatles films out there. This has to be original and has to be different. So, we were really kind of scrabbling around as to like, what is this film going to be? And coming up with different ideas. And then Kevin came up with this idea. We came across a number of times where they spoke about how much they loved TV and how much TV they watched, and it sort of became clear that this was like a big thing for them that, neither of us had realized. So Kevin came up with the idea of like, why don't we present the world that they see through the television? And that idea opened up a huge scope of what we could show. Saying that, I was also worried when he kind of proposed this idea, because I was like, God, is that going to work? But at the same time, that was a good worry to have, because it's like, okay, we're stepping outside the sort of run of the mill kind of area. So we set off down this track of trying to build this film that was sometimes quite brutal channel changes. And we weren't sure that it was going to work until quite a long way through the edit. And actually we did a screening and we realized that people are picking up the narrative that we're trying to sow through this quite kind of jumpy experimental film. And that was a kind of big moment, because I think what we were excited about is that people found it refreshing. It's a kind of novel way to see a narrative. So people were coming out of the film kind of energized, but they also understood the narrative. And so once we thought, right, this works, we were all in.
It was a really creative and fun way to keep you in the time of the film.
Yeah.
In the era.
Yeah.
That the concert was happening, that period of history. It was really well done. You had all those recordings, the audio recordings that you used to tell the narrative. We saw that Sean was an executive producer. Was there any creative say? Did you get any of the material from him directly?
Yeah, the Lennon states, they were extremely helpful and supportive of the project. But at the same time, they weren't trying to stick their oar into the project, and they respected Kevin as a filmmaker and stood back and let him make a real film, as opposed to a sort of puff piece of a film, if you see what I mean. A lot of the archive came from them and came out of the Lennon archive. And those conversations that you're talking about particularly, that was quite a big moment when we received those conversations, because someone called Simon Hilton, who is part of the Lennon estate, who helped us a lot, he came over to New York and he was going through the archive, and he sort of walked past a shelf, sort of dusty shelves that no one had looked at for 50 years, or well, it wouldn't be 50 years in the archive, but the tapes are 50 years old and no one had listened to them. And he saw this box and opened it up, and there were these tapes inside it, and he was like, I wonder what these are. And it came to light that they were these amazing recordings from the Bank Street apartment, from their phone. So once he sent them across to Kevin and myself, and we immediately knew that there was something very special, because you never hear John and Yoko like that, really talking completely away from public view, as they were as people amongst themselves.
Yeah, and you had these phone calls that he recorded everything. It's really kind of bonkers. Do you know why he was recording this? Was this out of fear? Was this like the time they wanted to deport him, or was he recording these? I think in the documentary they talked about how they think that someone is listening in on them. Is that why they were recording these as well, or what was the reason, do you think?
Yeah, I think that John and Yoko were just very playful people who had sort of recording things around, and hey, let's record this conversation where we're all in the room. And so I don't think it's a sort of, for them, that an unusual thing, although it seems kind of mad to suddenly record your phone calls for a while. But we do know, and as he says himself in the film, that he became very worried at some point about being bugged and followed, and there was a definite sense of paranoia around at times, and he wanted this record of what was said. As he said in the film, wasn't exactly sure why he was recording his calls, but thought they might come in handy, and they certainly came in handy for the film.
Well, yeah.
So maybe not his original intent, but 50 years later, we made use of it.
For me, hearing Yoko's voice and seeing a lot of this different footage of Yoko than you usually see when a story is about the Beatles, it was enlightening and really nice to see.
It's really lovely to hear that, because we really, as I said, Kevin was so clear and I was so kind of with him that we wanted to make something fresh and new and relevant for today. And so it's really nice to hear that response from people.
As an editor, it must have been daunting, because he has, what is it, like tens of thousands of footage, and they drop it on your desk and like, okay, make a film out of this. How, like from day one, when they drop the footage figuratively on your desk, how long to organize it? What is that process like? It just seems like overwhelming at first.
Yeah, no. I'm with you. I'm probably glazing over as you're talking, because I'm sort of remembering PTSD for this. Yeah, it was super daunting. There's two kind of things that are really daunting at the beginning. One is the amount of footage, but the other is like, what is the film going to be? That's the biggest struggle. Once you start getting a feel for that, then sort of starts dictating itself of what you're looking for. But I guess in terms of the amount of archives, we had the concert. That was really the way the film started, was they had this concert footage and they didn't know what to do with it. And Peter Worsley, the producer, connected with Kevin. Kevin kind of immediately jumped on to the project because he thought, this there's something here. But from that point, we were, as we were saying, we were really trying to kind of figure out what is the film going to be. We did have waves from the Lennon estate through Simon Hilton. Yeah, he dropped some sort of hard discs off with 1,000 hours of stuff on, so we had to kind of go through that. But then also other stuff kind of kept on coming in. And so in the end, we went through, I don't know, I mean, it's really hard to say, but thousands and thousands of hours of footage, and just to find those moments that really could be in the film.
This concert was a benefit.
Yeah.
And it was a benefit for this Willowbrook Center.
Yeah.
I've been reading a lot about the concert, what it was a benefit for. It wasn't highly publicized in the press. Did you find that?
Actually, I think the thing is that the concert did put a spotlight on Willowbrook and had an effect kind of politically and how these institutions were sort of dealt with. So I think the concert itself did have an effect, but there was press at the time. I think part of the problem was the concert wasn't initially particularly great. And I think it sort of just drifted out of public consciousness that this concert sort of existed and the connection to Willowbrook and so forth. So when we went back and started piecing through it, there were these connections there, but it had kind of drifted out of the public consciousness.
I was curious about it. I loved seeing the footage of the day that the kids arrived and all that.
Yeah.
It really added to the whole emotion.
It's very kind of moving, a lot of that footage, especially after you've seen the very traumatic footage from Willowbrook, from the Willowbrook report. It was shocking for us to see and work with that material. And it's obviously a shock in the film. And then you have this kind of moment in this day in Central Park, which is weirdly, I'm sort of only a few minutes from at the moment. So I'm going to go and make a little pilgrimage up there maybe later today. But you have this moment that is sort of very emotional as these kids who've been through so much kind of just get to have a moment. But, we were trying to say in the film that at the end of that, it's not like everything was okay. And I think at the end of that sequence, the woman is crying when the kids are getting back on the bus and they're going back to Willowbrook. So we were certainly not trying to sort of paint it as everything's okay now. And I don't think that's what sort of John and Yoko were saying. But what they were doing is giving some exposure to this situation and raising some money to help.
You can see John and Yoko, we knew they were very charitable, but you can see that adds a whole other dimension.
Just to sort of zoom out a little bit, they arrived to New York in late 1971 and escaping being the difficult time they'd had in England, and with Yoko being vilified in the press and the fallout of the Beatles breaking up, and they arrived with this kind of energized feeling and connected to people in the village like Jerry Rubin and so forth. And they kind of had a feeling like we can change the world. They were super famous and powerful. They had this sort of utopian sort of idea and became a lot more political. Over the course of the film, they sort of start to realize that actually maybe we can't change the world. They bump into all sorts of issues trying to do that, and then turn to things that maybe are more kind of humanist, like smaller ways that they can do good in particular situations. And so this concert came about kind of as a result of that change in focus for them. It's still them trying to make a change, but it seemed like they were always looking for a way to improve themselves and improve the world and help people. Their focus kind of went from this kind of bigger picture thing to this more targeted approach.
We are going 1-to-1 with Sam Rice Edwards. Actually, it's probably 2-to-1. We're 2-to-1 with Sam Rice Edwards talking about 1-to-1, the film about John and Yoko. But we need to take a break, so we will be right back.
Uh-oh. The last cookie.
You can get a new box of cookies in as fast as an hour with Walmart Express Delivery.
Are you my guilty self-conscience?
No, I'm the voice offering you promo code EXPRESS for free delivery on your first order.
Hey, who ate my cookies?
You mean, these cookies?
Order now. Welcome to your Walmart. Promotion valid for first express delivery order. $50 minimum subject to availability. Restrictions apply.
This episode is brought to you by Indeed. When your computer breaks, you don't wait for it to magically start working again. You fix the problem. So why wait to hire the people your company desperately needs? Use Indeed's sponsored jobs to hire top talent fast. And even better, you only pay for results. There's no need to wait. Speed up your hiring with a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply.
Springfest deals are still in full swing at Lowe's. Right now, get 5 bags of Stay Green Premium Color 2 cubic foot mulch for only $10. And get up to 40% off select major appliances. Plus, save up to $300 when you buy 2 or more select GE kitchen appliances of $396 or more. Lowe's, we help, you save. Valid through 4/16, excludes Alaska and Hawaii. Selection varies by location while supplies last. See Lowe's.com for more details and qualifying items.
We're back on the What Difference Does It Make podcast with our guest, Sam Rice Edwards, co-director and editor of One-to-One, John and Yoko.
As an editor, did you try and do everything like a timeline, or were things going back and forth a little bit just to help frame the movie?
I mean, in the end, everything is pretty much chronological, actually, just in a film that's kind of quite experimental with all these different fragments. It's good to kind of hold on to some things, and time was one thing that really helped us just to kind of tell the story so that we didn't want to throw people around too much. And there are a couple of flashbacks and so forth in the film, but charts their journey through late 71 to early 73.
Yeah. Was the initial film like 4 hours long?
Longer.
Was it longer?
It's
Yeah.
It's funny. I mean, at one point, I'm sure we had an 8-hour timeline. We wanted to make a film that wasn't too long. We wanted it to be refreshing. We wanted people to come out of the cinema feeling kind of energized and not, worn down.
What was the genesis to do a film about this?
I know that they've had this footage sitting there for a long time. And I think sort of periodically they thought, oh, we've got this concert, which is the only concert that John did ever after leaving the Beatles. I mean, in itself, it's a kind of really important thing. And then also the fact that, he's amazing, and you've got Yoko there as well performing. So I think they knew that it was something quite special, but they didn't know what to do with it. And so Peter Worsley, the producer, kind of got involved. And from that point, they wanted to find the team to kind of take it forward. And Kevin was the person to do that. And then from that, Kevin had those ideas that we kind of spoke about earlier, and we kind of went down that route. And
yeah, like early 70s type commercials, because, you're flipping the channel and, of course, commercials pop up. Whose idea was like, okay, we should put in, besides Nixon, besides Lennon, besides Jerry Rubin, why don't we throw in like something for Campbell's Soup or something like that?
Yeah, I mean, I can't remember, we were all kind of throwing ideas into the pot. I mean, we wanted to get the real feeling of kind of flicking through channels, but also I think what we were trying to do is kind of present a feeling of real life. And we felt that in life, you have something very serious next to something very funny, or, like that's what life's like. We're laughing and then we have a call and it's something kind of serious. And we didn't want sort of one tone of emotion. We wanted to throw people around a bit. And we felt that would give us a kind of real sense of humanity. So that was also the idea behind having, a war protest next to a snippet from The Price is Right. Do you know what I mean? And,
yeah, it was a good break, actually. It was nice to take a breath for a second.
Exactly, yeah.
It really sets the scene for the era, and particularly interesting for people who are not of that generation. We saw those commercials and the Nixon footage, but for different generations, it'll help bring them into the era.
Totally. And we wanted to make a time capsule, but also making a film about John and Yoko. Really, we want to get to know them in a way that previous films haven't achieved. And we kind of felt, well, actually just spending time with them in ways, the way that they are away from the public eye is a way that they haven't really been seen. And actually, so you come to this film and you can kind of get to know them more than you previously did. But also, in sort of answer to your question, we were trying to present the world that they were seeing. And, all these snippets were just things that they would have or could have seen. We kind of felt if the viewer can understand the world that they were in, then you'll understand them more.
I wanted to ask you about the sets, because they were in a bedroom for a lot of time. So did you recreate the bedroom?
Yeah, so that's the only thing. Everything's archived from the time, including the audio. Basically, the one thing that we filmed. The crazy thing is that you have John and Yoko, the most famous couple in the world. They come to New York. And they move in, for the 18 months, they move into this 2-room apartment in Bank Street in Greenwich Village. And, you knock on the door and John or Yoko will open the door. And this place was their kind of hub. This is where all the phone calls were. This is where they watched television. They kind of really lived this kind of small, as John said, like a young married couple. So this space was really, really important. It was the kind of core of the film. So we recreated the flat in complete detail with a lot of their own items in the flat, or the exact replica of the item, the exact same item, or sometimes, like the bedspread we had knitted in the exact same pattern. So it was really a labor of love. And I mean, I was more at the editing end, so I watched on in awe as the whole kind of production got on with that. But really, we were trying to be as true as we could to that space. And then we we filmed the space, drifting through the space. It's kind of like the spatial core of the film.
Yeah, that was highly effective. Just trying to drink it all in. Like, oh my God, it's amazing. Do you have any items from that set? Every item was pretty special.
I know. I'm actually kicking myself because I was so sort of wrapped up in the film. It's like you get completely obsessed by these things and like, where are we going? What are we doing? And that I forgot to ask, could I have that? I think that moment might pass, but I might see if there's still some stuff. I mean, the thing is that the reconstruction was so amazing. It was so great to kind of go down and film there. And we were thinking, it'd be great to use it for something as like an installation or something. But unfortunately, it wasn't possible in the end, and it got struck down. But it was a great few days filming that.
What was the one item you wanted?
I was just thinking about that. I mean, the record player would be nice. I think that would be very lovely to have John and Yoko's record player.
Was that the same make and model of what was in there? Was that they found it? They found wow.
Yeah. No, it all the stuff on the wall, the maps, the leaflets, like they were all found. The guys sort of went into overdrive and did an amazing job on that one, because I mean, it was important for the film, but it was also, we know that there's a lot of Lennon fans out there who are really sort of train spottery, and so we wanted to make sure that they were happy too.
There are quite a cast of characters in there. I guess the one that initially grabbed my attention was Jerry Rubin, a name I knew. They called him a yippie. I didn't know much about him. I was young at the time. I knew that he represented this movement. I don't know. He was a little bit out there. I think what he was trying to communicate was important. I don't know about his way of communicating that message worked well, or what was your opinion of? I'm sure you spent a lot of time with Jerry Rubin. What were your thoughts on this guy?
That's a tricky question, because it's sort of, I think my feelings changed a lot with him. I think he's a complicated person, like everyone, I guess. He undoubtedly was trying to do some good things at a time when you needed people to do that. But also, he was sort of reckless with other people and stirring up trouble in areas, and other people feeling the repercussions of that, and him seemingly not kind of worried about that, worried about other people. So it's hard. Like, I did spend a lot of time thinking about him. I definitely wouldn't put myself forward as an expert on Jerry Rubin, but I feel probably a really bad answer to your question, but I feel different things about him. I feel like he did a lot of good, but I also feel like he brought some important issues to the fore and made people think about them. But he also was destructive and polarizing in a way that maybe wasn't helpful. And so, did he help or did he hinder? is an interesting question to think about. So the things that he was trying to achieve, did he help or did he hinder those?
The main thing that Yoko and I are doing, and Jerry and all the people we're involved with, is to change the apathy that all the youth have. We must get them excited about what we can do again. And that's why we're going to go on the road, speak to them, sing to them, and do anything to get them alive again. And that's our job. And that will, from America, it'll spread to the rest of the world. Vive la revolution.
Did you come to your own conclusion?
I think he's trying to avoid that question, Holly.
Well, no, I mean, I could go there. I mean, you know what? I think that the world is so complex that it's very hard to. This is a complex way of getting out of your question, but it's like it's like there's so many permutations. I think one has to be careful about creating polarization in trying to get what you want. Because maybe you're not going to get exactly what you want, but it's better to kind of sort of keep communication going, even with the other side, as it were. And obviously that has massive kind of relevance today. I felt that maybe I'd come down on that side that maybe communication is a better way than polarization.
So
that's me.
Yeah. All right. Well, you had access to a lot of John and Yoko's probably intimate conversations. Did you shy away from, like, if they had some sort of polarizing conversations or something like, oh, this would not be appropriate? Or if they said something about Jerry Rubin, did you get any insight about what John and Yoko were thinking about what like someone like Jerry Rubin was doing?
Well, no, I mean, we definitely didn't shy away from, if we found something very controversial in the conversations, like we would put it in if it was relevant to the film. And, we definitely weren't we would have loved more of hearing what they thought about Jerry Rubin, but hopefully it's in there in the film, but they don't say it categorically. But at the beginning of the film, John in particular is quite enamored by Jerry, and you can see that in some of the archive, and he's excited by the idea of sort of political radicalism and protest, and starting to flirt with the ideas of violence, which has been the kind of antithesis of what he's been talking about. But then at a certain point, sort of breaks away from Jerry Rubin, sort of midway through the film, as he starts to kind of lose faith in Jerry's message. And Jerry's methods aren't really effective ultimately in taking society forward. Then they kind of have this break from this kind of political radicalism and move towards a more human to human thing, and that's where the concert comes in and helping the children of Willowbrook.
Yeah. One of my favorite things is the Mike Douglas show, where I guess John and Yoko hosted the show and they brought Jerry Rubin on. Did you enjoy watching? I'm sure you watched the entire week that they hosted.
Yeah.
So what did you think of that show, of that week of John and Yoko on the Mike Douglas daytime talk show?
We loved it. It was great. It's great. And it was funny. Like Mike Douglas himself is kind of an amazing character. I mean, I don't know huge about Mike Douglas, but he was just interesting the way he would, sing a song, and then he brought everyone in, and he was this kind of old smoothie. It was great, and really interesting mix of people. Some of the shows were better than others, but it was kind of fantastic. At times we were sort of thinking this could be really at the core of the film. Ultimately, we only have little bits of it. Yoko was on a previous Mike Douglas episode, so there was actually a sixth episode with just Yoko, and a bit of that is in the film, where she's sending a message to Kyoko, her daughter.
How did that story come to the forefront?
Yeah, it was really surprising, actually. Not something that's that well known. It certainly casts Yoko's situation in a very different light. You have to look at Yoko and realize that she was someone who was very strong. Not only was she putting up with and dealing with the whole kind of public vilification in the UK, she had come to the US, like basically searching for her daughter who had been kidnapped by her ex-husband. And she didn't see her daughter for, another 23 years after the film. So she was managing to do all the things that you see in the film while dealing with this extremely difficult personal situation. She sings the song Don't Worry Kyoko in the concert. Once you really realize what it's all about, it suddenly becomes a very, very moving song. Once it all clicked, we knew that song had to be in the film.
Julian wasn't mentioned at all in the film. Did you come across anything related to him in the footage that you were calling through for the film?
That's the thing. We didn't have that material. Julian's not in the film, and that's not by design. It's just by the fact that during that period, the footage and the phone calls that we have, Julian wasn't part of that. And not to say that it wasn't difficult for me to kind of answer that, because I know there's a bit of controversy around that. How was John as a father to Julian and so forth? We didn't have the material to kind of explore that. Maybe it wasn't so acute, that issue, during the period of the film that we've got,
Everybody's going to be interested in any story told about John Lennon, the relationships, but I understand, not totally relevant to this story.
Well, I mean, I think it could have been, and we searched for it. We certainly weren't trying to avoid it. I guess the truth is, when you make a film, you can't tell the whole story of a person's life, and you have to chart a course through someone's life that expresses some sort of truth. And it's just that we didn't have the material to include that element in the story, unfortunately.
there been a premiere for the movie and you get to meet Sean and Yoko and the royalty?
We met Sean. I'd love to meet Yoko, but didn't meet Yoko. And there's been premieres. It premiered at Venice Film Festival and then also played at Sundance and so forth. But we did have a screening with Sean, which was actually very, very moving because you're kind of working on this film. And for a year, we were kind of living and breathing the film. Then to sit down with Sean and watch it and suddenly realize how intensely personal it is for him. It was actually quite a moving experience. He loved the film. It was really, really interesting to talk to him afterwards. Things like Kyoko was, he's taking him back through that. And, he was there, didn't meet Kyoko until, 1995. So a lot of different aspects of the film would have affected him deeply.
Is there footage of their meeting in 1995? That's got to be really emotional.
Yeah, we've only got a photo of them together at the end, sort of from that period, just in credits to that. I don't know the answer to that.
Just going to ask him about his own Beatles journey. Who's your favorite Beatle? And when did you discover the Beatles?
Well, I mean, they've always been part of my psyche. I mean,
Sure.
It's kind of hard to not be, listening to my dad's records. And when I was a kid, I had some Paul McCartney albums when I was very young. And so I was always kind of loved McCartney, but I think I might have switched over to John. Just having sort of been through the process of this film, and it was really an interesting year making the film and just spending time basically with John and Yoko, almost having a sort of dialogue with them, and sort of waking up in the middle of the night and thinking, they thought this, or no one is perfect and we're all human, and John and Yoko have their foibles and failures, which they would admit to and speak about themselves. They're not perfect, but I would say of the Beatles, I'm probably a John Lennon fan. But I'm also a Yoko Ono fan, even though she wasn't officially part of the Beatles.
Okay, so you are billed as the co-director and editor when it comes to directing. The vision that you have as an editor carries over to directing?
Definitely. Editing is a great way, because you're so hands-on to sort of get to the heart of filmmaking. But I mean, especially when you're talking about documentary and especially archive documentary, then sort of editing becomes writing, and it's very much kind of connected to directing. There's a sort of overlap. I think Kevin was very lovely in giving me the co-directing credit because in sort of recognition of, I guess, the impact on the film. And I think the truth is that at a certain point, I always think at a certain point, sort of labels kind of drift away and it's just a group of people making a film,
I've watched fairly recently Meet Me in the Bathroom, which I love that whole era of New York. Yeah, I guess you're like the New York musician, documentarian, editor guy now. You're the go-to guy.
Yeah, it's so funny because with Kevin did Whitney as well, which is, obviously Newark, but like a lot of it was in New York. And I don't know what's going on, but I kind of somehow I've got some sort of spiritual connection to New York, which is great for me because I love the place.
All that old, it was kind of the same thing. Like, although at the time there were, like iPhones that could capture a lot of this footage. Were you using a lot of iPhone footage?
Well, no, Meet Me in the Box. So I think Meet Me in the Bathroom was actually because it was sort of 99 to 2004, 2005. So it
was before.
Yeah. But, people had sort of video cameras and stuff. So it was, you were starting to get more stuff. I guess what was interesting about that film is, COVID sort of hit and we couldn't do interviews, but we had time. And so we just started making the film. And so it sort of ended up being this thing where we used interviews from the time. So it had a connection to the John and Yoko film, like one-to-one, because again, there's no interviews in that. There were more interviews in Meet Me in the Bathroom, but it was a helpful learning ground for this film. Definitely took some learnings from that into this.
I'll go back to John and Yoko because it's IMAX. Does that affect the editing process? Because everything is everything is huge. How do you edit for that?
Well, you know what? We didn't know that it was going to be IMAX until after we'd finished the film, but it is a really good question because I originally came from a kind of commercials, music video background. And when I started doing stuff that ended up in the cinema, sometimes at screenings, I would get in, I'd be like, oh my God, I've cut that way too fast, because it really plays differently on different sizes. So, I mean, IMAX again I'm sort of really sort of interested to see how it plays out. We cut it with cinema in mind. Hopefully it works. I've heard it does.
It does indeed.
Was there unused concert footage?
Yeah, there definitely was. That there are other tracks. There's a lot of concert footage. The funny thing about the concert is actually the people who are filming it were apparently totally high when they were filming it.
Shocking.
And yeah, and you couldn't imagine but like basically a lot of it was really badly shot, but that actually weirdly kind of forced us into something that the way we wanted to deal with the concert, we didn't want it to be like a classic kind of concert edit. We wanted to have long shots on John or Yoko where you could, a lot of close-ups where you could really kind of feel the emotion.
Oh, that was part of my favorite part. Like those long shots of John are just like, oh my God, that is John Lennon on stage. It was, I really loved like those tight close-ups of John and just watching him. Yeah. Especially on IMAX. Yeah, it's crazy.
We wanted people to connect to them and kind of get drawn into the performance. And also, it's like when you go to a concert and you're actually there, you're not cutting, you're just watching. So we didn't want to kind of throw that off by having sort of really frenetic cuts of the concert. Although in some places we kind of got into a kind of frenetic edit, but for a particular reason. But in the main part, it was really long shot to let people kind of connect emotionally to John and Yoko. And that was a creative decision, but also it kind of solved the problem of how badly it was shot as well. It's like, it had a kind of effect.
I will say I did enjoy the audience shots too, because I love drawing it like this. This is what an audience looked like in the early 70s. This is how crazy they were, how thrilled they were. I mean, it was, as you mentioned, the first and only performance of John Lennon and Yoko up on stage. That must have been thrilling for, the Beatles had broken up a couple years earlier. They hadn't toured since 66. And then all of a sudden, there he is. He's up on stage. That's a Beatle up singing songs, singing Come Together. Yeah. I mean, that's insane.
Yeah. I mean, it's amazing when these things come together. I mean, that was one thing that it was funny, we'd sort of be editing and we'd sort of watch it back. And then at some point we were like, my God, he is so good. Mm-hmm. He's so good. He was just such a master at performing. Obviously the tracks are amazing, but the performance itself, he had done it so much with the Beatles, especially their early days in Germany where they were doing sort of 6 hours a day. He was just a complete master at performing, and it really comes across on screen.
For sure. Amazing.
Was there more unused concert footage?
There are other tracks. Yeah, we chose songs that we felt had some sort of connection to the time and the film and what we were trying to say through the film. The thread of the concert runs through the film, and then the thread of 1972 runs through the film. And there's a little just kind of interplay between the concert and what they're experiencing through the year. I'm sort of very English about these sort of things, and I don't normally say this sort of thing, but, I'm actually really proud of the film that we've made and the experience that people can have in the cinema. And it's really nice to see people kind of coming out energized and having had a sort of fresh experience.
Well, I know both Holly and I loved it. We saw it in IMAX, and it was just amazing to see and just to relive this era and to see John Lennon up on stage, and made me happy. It was nice to, it was amazing.
Well, that's lovely to hear.
Thank you for doing this. It was such a pleasure to talk to you about the film. We both really enjoyed it, and much success with it.
Oh, thank you so much, Holly. No, it's been a real pleasure chatting to you guys.
Okay, Holly, did you get all your John and Yoko questions answered?
I did love hearing about Yoko finding Kyoko and a little bit about the subsequent relationship. And maybe that can be a sequel, because you know how I love the family story.
Yeah, always interesting. I still have an obsession with John Lennon, anything about any of the Beatles, but particularly John Lennon. And fortunately, he was like the early social media guy. He was filming everything and recording things. It's crazy when you think about it. Like, he constantly had a camera going or recording phone calls, and a lot of it was in this documentary. Or I don't know, would you call this it's a documentary, right? It's a film documentary, right?
I would say it's a documentary because it's daunting, the story of how this one-to-one concert came together.
Yeah.
But a lot of the ancillary story, and a lot of the history of the time.
We were too young to kind of comprehend the early 70s, and this was just a great document to observe what was going on at that time with Nixon and the war and these with John Lennon in New York with Yoko, how they were dealing with all these social issues and all these ancillary characters, as you mentioned. I was just enthralled with everything that was going on.
Weird, because he's an enigma in that there's so many stories told about him. So much has been out there. Books have been written. Yet still, he's an enigma in that you feel like every time you're seeing something about him, like this film, you're learning something more.
Yeah, true. I love the conversations he had with his manager. Like, we're putting on the show, and like, what is Alan Grubman going to say? And, it was just a thrill. Again, thank you so much to Sam Rice-Edwards.
And thank you to Chelsea Peters of Ginsberg Libby. And thank you to Pantheon Podcast, as always.
Very nice. We have new episodes every Friday, so please subscribe if this is your first time listening to us because you love the Beatles and you love John Lennon. Well, we have interviews with different folk all the time. It's really a great listen, in my humble opinion. You could subscribe. You could follow us on our website, wddimpodcast.com, where you can subscribe to our newsletter. It's a monthly newsletter. It comes out just once a month. That's why we call it the monthly newsletter. And how else can they follow us, Holly?
You can find us on WDDIM Podcast and some fun stuff on our YouTube channel at What Difference Does It Make Podcast. So join us, won't you?
All right, so let's wrap this up right now until our next episode, which comes out on Friday. Next Friday. I don't know what episode it's going to be, but until next time, this is Dave.
This is Holly.
Check you later.
Over and out.